What's up everyone, this is Abhishek. Today I want to talk about why India has abstained from condemning Russia at the UNSC. There has been a lot of discontent, a lot of dissatisfaction which is being visibly expressed by Western statesmen and Western government officials all over social media and even through official government channels in high level dialogue with the government of India itself. Even back at home, a lot of Indian nationals are expressing discontent, they're questioning the government's move, and a lot of people are claiming that even citizens of India are claiming that the Indian government is being spineless and giving in to every whim and desire of the Russian state. There are two main reasons as to why India has done so, why India has abstained from condemning Russia, why it is remaining silent on the matter. The first reason is the relationship that India shares with Russia. Ever since India gained her independence, India has had a very long, very, I wouldn't say strong, but a very involved bilateral relationship with Russia, mainly focusing in areas of defense and trade. Now, to say that India is dependent on Russia for defense would be an understatement. More than 60% of India's defense imports come from Russia, and a huge chunk of these are crucial and critical technologies and equipment. Now, a very interesting thing about all of this is that most of these defense deals have taken place on India's terms, and a lot of the times Russia has gone out of its way to make sure that these deals work out for India. India procures a lot of cheap and modern weaponry, equipment, and technologies from Russia. A great example would be the S-400s that were procured by India. Now, beyond this, Russia also enables India to produce these weapons and these systems at home, to produce them locally. It provides hands-on assistance, hands-on help, and goes out of its way to make sure that these deals are feasible economically as well as technologically for India. Russia makes a lot of money from these deals, almost in billions. So what is so special about this defense relationship, one would ask? Although Russia is making a lot of money, so going out of its way does not seem like a big deal because they are gaining a lot of money. But when you consider this from a geopolitical, a strategic standpoint, a country giving weapons to another country, selling weapons to another country, is not merely a matter of making money. When a country like Russia sells weapons to a country like, say, India, it is not just making money, and it is not just a transaction of, say, handing over weapons and taking some money. Russia gives India a competitive edge over all the other countries in the region, and not just the region, even globally. In fact, it would not be a long stretch to say that Russia gives India a competitive edge over even itself, especially considering the current circumstances, the way the world runs today, how everything is transactional, and especially if you consider countries like the United States, who are extremely careful about handing out deals. To have a defense relationship with the United States, you need to go through three different treaties, which are very long, very detailed procedures that take place on a higher government to government basis. So when you consider all of this, for the defense relationship that Russia and India share, and it is actually lopsided in a way that it benefits India, because Russia has helped India a lot in a way that it benefits India. So when you consider all of this and you pair this with the fact that on a global stage Russia is giving India not just weapons and not just making money for itself, but it is giving India a competitive edge. It is giving it a higher standing, higher respect, higher reputation amongst other countries, because the military of country determines a lot about how much that particular country, how much of a say that particular country has on the global stage in international matters. So Russia is giving India a lot more than weapons, and even considering the goodwill that Russia has towards India, even that has a lot of implications towards the power that India has when it comes to power plays in the United Nations or in other international groupings. So considering all of this, you will realize that Russia is giving India a lot more than weapons. It is giving it something even more important than weapons. In fact, you could consider that Russia is providing India security in an indirect and in a very underlying sense. So when you consider all of this, you will realize that India abstaining is actually not such an odd thing to do for India. And when you consider the second point, that is China, you will realize that it is actually the perfectly natural thing for India to do. Now, for instance, the second main reason for India abstaining being China. China as a threat to India. India is surrounded by very aggressive neighbors. Pakistan on one side, China on the other side, and then you have rogue nation states like Myanmar, and previously we had Bangladesh. And so when you consider all of this, and you have Afghanistan to the other side, and all of the terrorist activities that the state of Pakistan espouses, when you consider all of this, you realize that India is in a very precarious position with terms to defense and security. Now, considering China, has been behaving very aggressively when it comes to India. But be it in form of skirmishes along the border, building roads in unclaimed land, unclaimed territory. China does not target India purely via skirmishes on the border, but also through economic attacks. For example, recently, India wanted to be. There was a few government initiatives launched to make India self-sustaining in the fields of medicine. China hiked up the price for starting materials used for manufacturing pharmaceutical drugs, and completely dropped the price for intermediate and end materials used in the manufacturing of pharmaceutical drugs. Now, what this does is this disincentivizes Indian manufacturers and local producers from producing medicines from scratch, and it encourages them to buy ready-made partial materials, which would basically be compounds, midway compounds, which will then be used to produce medicines, which is almost the equivalent of purchasing finished goods. And this is a bad thing because this disincentivizes local production. It sets up a kind of stage which later on becomes very rigid and fixed, where the economy becomes the kind of economy that is dependent on imports, which is a very bad thing for India. And this is something very ingenious, a planned and calculated move made by China, almost an attack, the equivalent of an attack itself, an economic attack, a new kind of warfare. So these are the kind of threats that India faces. And one thing that the world needs to understand is Pakistan and China are huge threats, not just to India but to the world. Be it in terms of ideologies, be it in terms of state-sponsored terrorism, be it in terms of the oppression of minorities or suppression of freedom and rights and expression. Because if you consider it, a lot of people are saying Russia is the new Germany and Putin is a new Hitler. But if you think about it, China is an economic superpower. Russia is no longer an economic superpower. Russia is purely relying on military might and nuclear strength. China, on the other hand, is a huge global economic superpower with very long-standing and decades, even centuries-old plan of global domination. China has money, China has resources, very strong military, a very capable nuclear arsenal. People, when they say Russia is the new Germany, they say it in terms of, oh, Russia will become the new Germany. It is on its way. But if you think about it, China is already the new Germany. There are minorities already sitting in concentration camps. There are minorities who are already suffering, the Uyghurs, who are already, if you read horror stories of people who managed to leave the country after being let out of these concentration camps, it's horrifying, it's unbelievable. And the thing about Jewish concentration camps set up by the Nazis was that they had gas chambers, they were killing people, they were working them to death. And these are things we know. But when you consider Chinese concentration camps, we downplay it a little, but that is because we don't really know what's going on there. We have no idea because we have no idea what goes on in there. When you read tales of people who were let out of the concentration camps, it's so horrifying and unbelievable. So you can only imagine what happens to the people who they're never going to let out, because China is very calculated, and especially when it comes to things like concentration camps, which they have legally established using a completely different government language, a completely different legal language. These concentration camps are not referred to as concentration camps. In fact, legally they are not concentration camps. They are almost a certain kind of rehabilitation centers, ideological rehabilitation. So you can see the extent to which China goes to take care. So these people are being let out. China would have already had some kind of foresight as to what would happen once they were out. And if their treatment was only so bad, you can only imagine how bad the situation is for people already in these camps. Be it being bunched into same rooms in unhygienic rooms, like prison-like rooms, being tortured, being beaten up, being brainwashed and stuff like that. China is a threat on a completely different level. China has a completely different, and the only way for India to combat these threats and for the world to combat these threats through India, because the world fighting China through India is a very important thing that people need to understand. Geographically, the West is nowhere near China. The West can fight and contain Russia because they are right next to it. They have they, they can sustain it there. They can contain it there. They can't do the same thing for China because it's an ocean. It's oceans away. It's an ocean away. It's seas away. Then it's a whole landmass away. There's so many countries in between. It's almost impossible, logistically infeasible for the United States and for Western Europe to try to contain China. Because when it comes to real life, when it comes to real things, we've all been we're in an age of installation, an age of abstraction where we can interact with the world through our cell phones, and we do not know the we do not have to worry or consider the physicality of the world. We do not have to consider the physical implications and the physical or geographical intricacies of various operations, be it intercontinental deliveries of packages or business, the implications of setting up and running a business in another country, things like that. We do not have to worry about the physical and geographical implications and intricacies of those matters, because we're living in a world where everything has been abstracted and everything has become point to point. The user, the consumer only needs to worry about the interface that he interacts with to obtain whatever goods or services. But when it comes to, but a lot of these things behind the scenes, not behind the scenes, but rather in actuality, beyond our minds, beyond our experiences, the things that happen to give us these services and these goods, everything happens in the real world, in the physical world, and within geographical and physical constraints. So it applies equally to Western alliances forming in the eastern region, to Western aid and assistance, be it militarily, logistically, trade wise, economically, infrastructure wise. All of these things make a huge difference. The physical barrier, the physical distance, the geographical distance between these countries it comes into play, and it's very difficult for the United States. It's very expensive for the United States or for Western European countries to aid and assist countries like India, or to put money in, to put infrastructure and technologies into the into the South Asian region, into the Indian subcontinent, and make it a more democratic, more freer region where there's free trade and there's a propagation of free ideas, liberty, free movement, rights, stuff like that. It's hard for the West to fully aid, inject, and propagate all of these things in the Indian subcontinent. And so when you consider all of this, you slowly start realizing that India is alone in this fight against China and Pakistan and all the elements that are threatening not just India but the world. Elements that have widely varying and hugely, immensely incomprehensible implications for the future of the world. India needs an ally in the region. India does need an ally, and I would not say an ally, but India does need a friend in the region, a friend, loosely speaking, a friend, and in more accurate terms, a defense partner in the region, someone who can aid and assist India militarily. When you think about that, the only country that is actually capable of providing another huge country another huge and already competent country like India with help and with aid and with cheap weapons and with cheap technology, the only other country that is capable of doing that is Russia, be it cheap fuel or cheap weapons or whatever. This fight is not just about Russia versus the West. It's actually much larger than that. And in the grander scheme of things, in the larger scheme of things, India does need Russia's support. India does need to repay Russia's support that has already been extensively lent to India at zero interest. For example, when India fought the India-Pakistan wars, fought the Sino-Indian wars, the Russian military was deployed at the borders of India. For example, there was an instance where at that time the United States and the British were sending their naval fleets to aid and assist Pakistan on the Indian borders, in the Indian seas, trailing the coast of India. And at that time, Russia had deployed their naval fleet, which came and intercepted the Western naval fleets. And because of that, they turned around and they went away. And if not, their intentions were to aid Pakistan to hinder the Indian military efforts going on in the region. This is a huge thing because back then India was running the non-alliance movement. where they were saying that they were not aligning with anyone, and Russia was giving no bars held support, even militarily intervening was a huge thing back then, even now. And Russia did all of this without asking for anything in return. And it did not even ask for them to publicize this, because considering India's non-alignment stance, India could not publicize or make it known that they were aided and helped so much by Russia. And Russia never uttered a word of protest, never implied any that they should have been an equation of gratitude or anything like that. At an international stage, at an international level, the level the game is being played at, these kind of things are not things that can be paid back ever, because everything is in an instant and the implications are unknown, unimaginable to be more precise. So when you consider all of this, the threats India faces on both sides, not just as India but as a part of the free world, because that is what India sees itself as a free country, a country for free people. And when you consider all of that, and the inability of the West to support India, even though they match in terms of ideologies, the inability of the West to support India, when you consider that, and the Chinese threat, and when you consider the cheap weaponry, the cheap arms, and the unrelentlessly no bars held military support, economic support, energy support, fuel support that Russia provides to India. When you consider all of this, you realize that it is not so odd. It is not so unnatural for India to abstain from condemning Russia, because this is something that not just India needs, but rather the world needs. It's for everybody's best. It's in everyone's interests. So when you consider all of this, you slowly start realizing that it is sort of like, say you have a history exam tomorrow and six of your friends have a basketball match tomorrow. So your six friends would be practicing for the basketball match while you would be preparing for your history exam. Now it isn't odd that there's an exam tomorrow and your friends are preparing for the match. Their careers further depend on that. Their scholarships will depend on that. Their other extracurriculars will depend on that. The school or college will depend on them to win on this match, because it's a huge thing. So they would be preparing for the match, and you would be preparing for your test, because that's what's important for you. That's what's in your lane. It is the same thing with Russia, with India. It isn't odd that India isn't condemning them like everyone else. It is a natural thing for India to do the same way. It would be the natural thing for you to prepare for your test instead of playing basketball with your friends who are playing because they have to practice. Trust me, everyone has something to lose from this war. This is a huge security upset in the region that will have ripples all over the world, huge implications. So obviously everyone has a lot to lose, and so you see people acting, you see countries acting out of their own interest. The West is worried about the energy situation, the Nord pipelines, the gas pipelines. They are worried about the fuel prices, which are already skyrocketing. The United States is worried about various various interests that I do not even want to get into right now. And you have all of this, and India is also concerned, but India has other concerns that are of a higher order, not just for India but for the world. And so keeping all of that in mind, India has to abstain from condemning Russia. India has to maintain Russia as a friend and not as a foe, and especially considering the depth of the past and the responsibility that India has towards its own and to the future of the world. That is basically what comes into play when diplomats sit and think about what to do in these kind of situations, because India has always been a country of the free world and not of the bygone era of authoritarianism or dictatorship. And if you look at it, India itself was a victim of colonization, and it fought colonialism, and it came out and gained its own independence. So while it appears to be against its nature and it is a very odd thing, it still is an action of the natural order for India. But the only thing is that the timing and the circumstances are very painfully awkward. So that's about it. Thanks a lot for watching my video, guys. Please do like and subscribe. Thank you for your time. Bye.